Uh, so alhamdulillah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no matter how much I'm disappointed and angered at the Jewish people, get rid of them. That's not in the cards. Okay, we're beginning Pezayin Amid Sheni, 3 lines from the wide lines. Okay, Amar Rab Laza. Let me just get it a little bit right. Amar Rab Laza said, Afilu b'shas kasui shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even when God is angry and expresses anger, zoiches harachamim, he remembers to say something about being merciful. In other words, it's like when a Jew curses another Jew, he says, "May your bread be soft and your butter hard," or something like that. Not really a curse, but even when a God is angry, he says something about rachamim. Because the pasuk says, I'm no more going to have rachmanus on the Bnei Yisrael. So he mentions rachmanus even at the time of being angry at Jewish people. Am I going to forgive them? In the context of the pasuk, God says they did so much averis. Will I ever forgive them? So you see that even when God's angry, he says something about rachamim, that he would forgive them. You can always twist his words. So that's another statement. Another statement Rab Laza said, oh, very interesting thing. God spread out the Jewish people to be exiled all over the world between the nations. Why? Ela kedei sheyitaisu aleim gerim. So that Gerim should join them. So the Jews are all over the world, so that converts should come to join them. Shenema, they spread the Amunah on the world. Shenema, Uzratia li ba'aretz, I'll plant you in the ground. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says. So he planted us all over the world. Kulum Adam Zreya Sa'a, a person plants a pound of grain, Ela Hachnas Kamakurim, because he wants it to grow and have tons of grain. So same thing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu planted the Jewish people all over the world so that the Goyim should join us and become Gerim on their own. Even in our time, you see this, I think this Mary Stoudemire, not simple. Became a ger. Fascinating.
I saw him come out from the Waldorf Astoria Hotel a few years back as we were walking down Agaron to the Kotel on a Shabbos afternoon, and all these little kids noticed him, and they started yelling, "Amani, Amani, Amani!" We didn't know what this is all about. Right. Then we saw who it was.
It's interesting. I don't think he was a ger then. I think it's recent.
No, he wasn't officially a Jew yet.
He wasn't. He was studying in a yeshiva.
It's recent.
Yeah. Recent, and the fact is that, like you said, he's not coming out of a cheap hostel. Nope. He's coming out.
No, he went to Israel to play for the Israeli basketball team after his knees were shot and he was done with the Knicks. And I guess he fell in love with Yiddishkeit. And my father actually, and my cousin and my nephew have a picture with him at a game in Israel, and he became like this. He figured he's a smart guy, and obviously saw that the Goyish world was nothing, and he had every type and every gospel as possible. He's a multimillionaire, and he saw that there's nothing to it. And he came to Eretz Israel just like he was done. He was injured, he was washed out. He still wanted to play, and he just chose Israel to play there, and he became big.
There was a video from last week or 2 weeks ago where he said, if you think playing against Shaq is hard, we're learning a daf Gemara. Right. He said understanding a daf is hard.
But you gotta send it to Baruch. You gotta find it to Baruch. Right. I saw that. Yeah.
That's fair. I got it. That's fine.
I'll find it for you. I'll send it to you.
Send it.
Yeah. Shows you how hard your job is.
Rabbi Yochanan says, I'll bring you another pasuk that we're supposed to make gerim, because it says V'richamti asher l'ruchama. God says I'm going to have rachmanis on those that I said I'm not going to have rachmanis, and it ended the pasuk V'amarti l'loi abi ami ata. That's the end of the pasuk. Those that I said are not my nation should become my nation. That means those that were not my nation will cling to the Jewish people and they'll become part of my nation. So we see that the idea of God sending us all over the world, from Australia to the Key West, is always is so that we should have Gerim. What does it say in the pasuk? Never speak bad about the Jewish people. The pasuk says, "Al talshin eved el adoinov." Don't slander a servant to his master. Tell his master how bad this servant is. Penya kalelcha. Maybe he will curse you. The master will curse you for saying such bad things about his slave. V'shamten, you'll be found guilty. Uksiv, says the pasuk, Dar aviv yikalel. A dar, a generation aviv yikalel that cursed their father. Ves imay lo yivarech, and don't bless their mother. And basically, it's our generation that the generation that the Yidden achoite, they hate God, and they also hate being part of the Jewish people. Mishum the Ava Yikalel Ves Iba Lo Yivarech Al Tal Shem. Because that's the pasuk psukim come right after each other. What does the pasuk mean? Because they curse their father and their mother, they don't bless, don't slander them. Ella, this is the pasuk. Afilu dar she'avi yikalas, even a generation that they curse their father. Ves Iba Lo Yivarech Al Tal Shem Eved Eladoinav. Don't say bad things about the servant to the master, even if they do terrible things. Ninolan, how do you know that you're not supposed to speak bad about the Jewish people as a whole? From the story that we just learned, Hoshea, God is very disappointed in Hoshea for speaking bad about the Jewish people. Rabbi Hoshea says, "My diksiv." Why does it say in the pasuk? Tzitkas, it's God did a good, like a tzedakah with us, pizroinai, by spreading us out, be Yisrael, with the Jewish people. What does that mean? Tzedakah asa kadosh baruch hu be Yisrael. Amazing thing. God did like a righteousness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the Jewish people. Shepizroi lebeinu umas. There's Jews all over the place, and therefore, what do we gain from that? So the Gemara explains that it's not easy to destroy the Jewish nation. As you see, that Hitler couldn't destroy the Jewish nation because he first had to conquer the world, and then we're all over the place. And this is exactly what this min said to Rab Chanina. Anan malina minaycho. We are greater than the Jewish people. He was a Roman. Ksibuchu, he says, by the Jewish people, it says, Kisheshes Chadashim Yashav Shab. They Jews stayed for 6 months in a certain place, and I think it was Aram, and then they destroyed them. They destroyed all their enemies within 6 months. Okay, 6 months in Tanakh, we learned the Jews destroyed their enemies. But us, there's so many years that the Jews are spread out amongst the Goyim. We don't do anything to you. So Amaloi, so you see, we're better than you. Amaloi, should I have one of my students answer you? Yes. Nitbaloi Rabbi Shaya. Rabbi Shaya, the student answered this mean. The student of Rabbi Shaya is the student of Rabbi Chanina. Amalei, so Rabbi Shaya said, you know what? You know why you don't destroy the Jewish people? You know why? This is the secret. You don't know how to do it. If you want to destroy the entire Jewish people, they're not, all the Jewish people are not located in one country. They're all over the place. That was the tzedakah that Hashem did with us. If you want to kill just the Jews in your locale, people will call you a kingdom that just kills out its civilians, its citizens. So again, like Hitler didn't kill out the Jews from Germany at the start of the war. It's only after things developed, as he took control of more countries, then he killed out his own people, the German Jews. But it only came later because he didn't want to start just killing all the Jews in his locale, which he could have easily done. What? Amalei. So this min said, or this Roman said, Gapa Duramai. I swear by the wing of the eagle of the God of the Romans. We go to sleep and we wake up. This is all on our minds and how to kill the Jewish people. It's never left us. And you're right. The reason why we don't do it is because you're all over the place. What does it say in the pasuk? Elikim Haven, Elikim Haven, Elikim Haven, Elikim Haven, Darkav Hu Yodas Makoima. Why does it say that pasuk over here? Yodea Kodesh Baruch Hu God knew that the Yidden cannot be mekabel the gzeres of the Romans, and because they're achzorius, that's the pshat. The reason why God said that I'm not throwing you to Rome right away is because the Jews, that's why he exiled them to Bavel, to Babylonian. That's why the first place we went after destruction, the first place in English, was Babylonian, because they're not as severe and cruel as the other people. Hold on. Okay. So now the Gemara says, the Amar Ablazer says, because they're deep as the purgatory. It's as deep as hell in there. I mean, probably it's as hot there too. And for whatever reason, there's a pasuk says, God says, from purgatory I'm going to redeem them, and from death I'm going to bring them the geula. So, but there's a good reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose Bavel as opposed to any other nation of the world for the Jewish people to be exiled there. Rab Chanina says the reason why the Jews, after the first were sent to Bavel, because the language of the Babylonians are very similar to the language of the Torah. And what does that mean? That means that Aramaic is very similar to Hebrew, and therefore that's a way to remind people not to forget the Torah in their exile. Rabbi Yochanan says the reason why we went to Bavel was because that's where Avraham Avinu comes from. That's God sent us to our mother's house. That was the birthplace or the place that raised Avraham Avinu. For example, as a parable, a man got angry at his wife. Where does he send her? To his mother's house. So therefore, we all were sent to Bavel, specifically Bavel, to remind us of our humble beginnings of where Avraham Avinu came from. This is what Rabbi Alexandria taught us. The Amar, Rabbi Alexandria taught us, 3 things ended up returning to their source. And I bet you're going to learn something today that you never knew before. To me, this was a chiddush. 3 things that we had were returned back to the original location. Elohim Yisrael, Kesef Mitzrayim, Uksav Luchas. The Jewish people, the money that we got from Mitzrayim, all that wealth that we left Mitzrayim was what ended up going back to Mitzrayim. Uksav Luchas, the letters of the Luchas. That means the letters flew back. Yisrael, the Jews went back to ended up returning to their original birthplace. Ha'adarman, we just explained that. Kesef Mitzrayim, the money that we took out after leaving Mitzrayim, never remained with the Jewish people, because sometime in Tanakh, the Ksiv, Ahi b'shana chamishis lemelech Rechavim, Ola Shishak melech Mitzrayim al Yerushalayim. Shishak, the king of Mitzrayim, came upon Yerushalayim and plundered all the wealth that the Jews had at that time, which basically was still from the wealth of Mitzrayim, and they took it back. So it never ended up staying. Wealth and the Jewish people didn't go so well at that time. So and it ended up going back to Mitzrayim. Ksav Luchais, this handwriting of the Luchais, the Ksiv Vashabran Leinechem. Moshe broke the Luchais in front of our eyes. Tana, we learned in the Brisa, Luchas Nishbro Va'isias Parchais. The Luchais were broken and the letters flew to back to heaven. Ula Amar. Ula says, what is the reason why God threw us to Babylonium? Of all the places of the world, why did we end up there? So the Gemara says, Kedei sheyochlu tamarim v'yasku b'Torah. We're on Pechasim Aleph. So that the Jews should be able to eat dates, have a quick nourishment, and they don't have to be busy preparing food, and they'll have plenty of time v'yasku b'Torah and be busy themselves with the Torah. It tells the Gemara a story how easy it was to get food and a nourishing fruit in Bavel. Ula ikla lepumpadisa. Ula visited Pumpadisa. This is his first time in Babylonia. Kariva lay Tinrina the Samre. They brought to him a basket full of dates. Amalu. So he asked the question, Kama kihane bezuza. How much do they charge for 1 coin? How many dates do you get for 1 coin? Amalehe, he said to him, we get it in Costco. You get as much as you want. Tlas, you get 3 dates, bezuza with 1 coin. So Ula, not being from this locale, had a sharp judgment against the people of Pumbedisa. He said, you could get a basket full of honey for just one coin. And the people of Babylonian are not busying themselves in Torah, they're busying themselves in commerce. If it's so easy to make a living and easy to get your sustenance in Babylonian and Babel, and so they're not living up to what they're supposed to do, is learning Torah. But after he ate those dates, at the night, he got stomach pains from it. And therefore he realized it's not so easy to eat these dates every day. And Omar, he changed his tune. He said, you could get a basket full of poison just with a zuzah bubble. In other words, it's so easy to get poison in Bavel, and the Babylonians are learning Torah. So he changed it and spoke in praise. That's probably how this Gemara gets in here. I mean, it's easy to say something sharp until you experience it yourself. And that's what happened here. And Ula changed his mind. I always think to myself that you see how easy it is to never fall, and there's so much temptation all around. And yet people are learning. So there's a special thing that you can say. People always say, yesteryear they learned so much better and they were more this and more that. It's not true. Every generation has their different challenges. And Ula, as you can see in this Gemara, changed his mind all about Pumbedisa when he actually experienced it. The Amar Rab Loza said, what did it say in the pasuk? In the future, nations will say, the Jewish people will say, let's go up to the mountain of God, to the house of the God of Yaakov. So the Gemara asks, is it God, the God of Yaakov, but not the God of Avram Yitzchak? Why are we saying, let's go up to the mountain, to the house of God of Yaakov? Ella loika Avram. It's not like Avram Shekasa boy Har, that it was written mountain. It's called a mountain because Avram said that the place of the base of Migdash is on a mountain. Like Yitzchak, not like Yitzchak Shekasa boy Soda. He called the area a field. Ella ki Yaakov. We refer to the Mokem HaMikdash to the way Yaakov referred to the Mokem HaMikdash. Shekaroi Bayis, he called it a home. Shenema, and a home stands for something that's permanent. Shenema v'hikra shem hamokem ahu beis el. So that's why that pasuk refers to Lekei Yaakov, because Yaakov was the only person from the Avos that referred to the final resting place of Hashem as a home, a bayis. That's why it's called Beis HaMikdash. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan talks about the Gadol Kibbutz Goliath Ki Yom Shnivra Bo Shemaim V'Aretz. But we say it in Shemoneh Esrei, Tekab B'Shayfa Gadol L'Cheresenu V'Sones L'Kabitz. We believe that all the Jews in exile are going to gather in one place, and then we're going to make our way to Eretz Yisrael. So that day that we're all going to be gathered in one locale is going to be such a great day as the world was created. Gadol Kibbutz Goliath Ki Yom Shnivra Bo Shemaim V'Aretz. It'll be as great as the day that the heavens and earth were created. Shenamar, the Nixplitzu B'nai Yehuda B'nai Yisrael Yachtav, the Jewish people of B'nai Yehuda, which is Shevet Yehuda and Binyamin. B'nai Yisrael is what we believe is that the 10 tribes are coming back. We're all going to come back together, right? Like we say in davening, Ufdei Chunamecha Yehuda v'Yisrael. We all believe that the 10 tribes are coming back, and we're all going to be gathered in one place. And a lucky miracles of miracles will have one leader. We're going to come from that land, and we're going to go to Eretz Yisrael. Kigadol Yom Yisrael. The day that we get replanted in Israel will be a great day. As I mentioned, one of the earliest places of the first settlement was Yisrael, and it says Yom. And Yoim, so there's a comparison. That day is going to be as great as the day that the world was created. Back into the Gemara that we learned before. We learned before that a Yosef sheshachtu all of apitropis. Look at the Gemara. If a guy has two curators, an orphan has two curators, he can decide after it was geschachten which carbon pesach he's gonna which carbon pesach he wants to join. So that's what the Mishnah says. Shamet minei yesh breirer. Do we hear from there that you can choose later on after the shechita? Can the katan choose later on which carbon Pesach he's going to join. Amar Rabbi Zera says, Sel Labayas Mikol Malkan. Really, the apitropim, each one of the apitropim, they're like their fathers. They're like the father of the orphan, and the orphan is a katan. So they can force the katan, just like any father can force the katan to be part of his carbon Pesach, and the katan has no voice. So it's almost as if this Yosim has two fathers, and therefore that's not called being counted as two different, as part of two different carbon Pesach. This is an example of being forced upon the katan to carbon Pesach, which he can choose later on which one it is. But a normal person, he can't choose after the shechita. You can't bring two carbon Pesach and say, I'm going to decide later on which one I'm going to join. No, we don't say that. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Brisa, sell base of boys. A man can force that everybody in his family to join his carbon Pesach. He can force his children, young children, to join him in the carbon Pesach. And his servant, the maid servant that are going. Whether he asks there that if they want to join him, whether they don't want to join him, this is their carbon Pesach. He's the boss. For his kids over bar mitzvah, he has to ask them. With his maid and servants who are Jews, and his wife. He has to ask them, do you want to join my carbon Pesach or not? He can't just assume that they're going to join his carbon Pesach. Then the Brisa says, Tanya Idach, but we learned in another Brisa, a person should not shecht a carbon Pesach for his children who are 13, through his servant, the maids who are Jews, and his wife, only if you ask them. Okay? This Brisa is just reversing the order. Aval, than the previous Brisa. Aval shoichet hu al yedei b'noi b'ita aktanim, v'yedei avdei shechazai aknanim, be'bedatam, be'en shloi bedatam. If it's for your son and daughter who's under bar mitzvah, or his eved and shivcha who are goyim, you don't have to. It doesn't matter if you ask them or you don't ask them. That's fine. V'kulan sheshachtu v'shachat aleim. Let's say they shechted their own carbon Pesach, and the shachat rabim alim, and their master shechted their own carbon Pesach. Yaitzim mitzel rabim. They could be yoitze with the rabbis, with their master. They yoitzim b'shel atzmim, because an eved has no right to shecht his own carbon Pesach, and if his master shechted a carbon Pesach, he's only yoitze with the master's carbon Pesach and not his own carbon Pesach. But chutz min ha'isha. An isha is different. She can decide to shecht her own carbon Pesach and not go with her husband. She because she can always, get out of the bailus that a husband has to his wife. As Rashi explains, that a woman could say to her husband, "Don't give me money for support, and I'll make my own living," and that she can do. So therefore, she has a mouth and she has her own independence, and therefore she doesn't have to fall into her husband's account, husband's carbon Pesach. So the Gemara asks, "Ma'ishna isha? Why just an isha? Even even your oldest son could shecht his own carbon Pesach. Why does the Brisa end off chutz min isha? Only the isha can make her own carbon Pesach. Every gadol, even an eved that's an ivri or a shiv or amavriya or your son and daughter that are over bas mitzvah or bar mitzvah, they can make their own carbon Pesach. What the Brisa meant to say, yes, Isha can make her own carbon Pesach, and people who are similar to her, like all the gedolim of your household, can make their own carbon Pesach. Now the Gemara asks a question against the Brisa. Hagufa kasha. The Brisa seems to contradict itself by without any outside question. Amrit, you say chutz min isha sheyichayil limchos. You say that if she shechts a woman, she could object from joining her husband's. If she verbally objects joining her husband's cousin Pesach, that's fine. It's only because she verbally objected. If she doesn't object and she's quiet about the whole thing, then she defaults to her husband. Then Vaktani Reisha, but the beginning of the Brisa says, you can't force your wife only if you ask her. Hostama, but if she doesn't say anything, Loy nafka, she was not yoitza. So what is it? Does she have to verbally say she's joining her husband's Karban Pesach or not? So the Gemara says, my elamidaitin lav the amri in. It's not that she said yes, elabistoma. That means that even if she's silent and doesn't say yes or no, she defaults to the husband. So even if she doesn't say yes or no, the default of a woman is by her husband. And that's what it means. Medaita means the default will be her husband, because we assume that's what she wants. Now, but that excludes if she specifically and verbally says, I don't want my husband's Karban Pesach, yes, she can opt out. So now, the Gemara asks one last question. All these people that make their own Karban Pesach, and the balabas, or the husband, shechted, yoitzim b'shal rasbim. They only yoitzim with the master. They can't have their own Karban Pesach. The bestoma, there, they didn't ask her. She went ahead and shechted her own Karban Pesach, and the husband shechted a Karban Pesach. And we see from there that bestoma, only if she shechted a Karban Pesach, that's when she could opt out. So after the Gemara, Amarava came and sheshachtu eilecha michu gadol bizeh. There's no bigger objection if the fact that she shechted her own Karban Pesach, that shows she objects joining to her husband's Karban Pesach. So the bottom line is, a woman, if she says nothing, she automatically defaults to her husband. If she says no, I don't want my husband, of course she can yoitza somewhere else. And even if she says nothing, if she actually shechts her own Karban Pesach, that's an indication she doesn't want to join her husband, and therefore she's not part of her husband's Karban Pesach. The Mishnah said, Eved shnei shutfim, an Eved that belonged to two partners, the Eved, if the Eved was belonged to Reuven or belonged to Shimon, and they both have a 50% share, he cannot eat Karban Pesach from any one of them. So the Gemara says, Ramalei, Rav Einer Saba, Rav Nachman. Rav Einer Saba asked the stira to Rav Nachman. Now we learned in our Mishnah, he cannot be Yotze from either one. He can't go to his master Reuven and he can't go to his master Shimon. He's not Yotze any Karban Pesach because each one is not their owner. He only owns half. But Tanya, we learned in another brisa that half an Eved of two partners, he has a choice. He could go to one and he could go to the other. Amalei, so Rav Nachman answered, Eina Sava, Amayra Eina Sava. But this is what he said: Pasya ukama, you black vessel. In other words, this Eina Saba learned a lot of Torah, and his clothing were dark because of that, because of his hard work in learning. It got dirty even. You and I will figure out this teretz and how to resolve this contradiction. What is the din by an Eved Shnei Shufim? Mas Nisan, our Mishnah says that he's not Yoitza, but the Kapti Adadi. If the two partners don't want that the Eved should eat the Karban Pesach by the other side. So he has a right to withhold the Eved's right to go to eat to the other side, since he owns half the Eved. The Brisa says that we give the Eved the choice which owner he wants to go to join the Karban Pesach. They're like Kapti Adadi. It's two partners that get along. And although they own one Eved, they don't mind if the Eved goes to the other side to eat the Karban Pesach. Then the Mishnah says, so a guy who's a half an Eved and one partner freed him. So he's a half an Eved and half a free person. So then he can't eat from his master. He can't, if his master shechted a Karban Pesach, his master, he can't go eat the Karban Pesach by his master. Says the Gemara, Mishal Rabu, he can't eat from his master. If he shechted his own Karban Pesach, he could eat. What time we learned to the Brisa, that Eved, Chetzi Ben Chayrim, cannot eat from his own Karban Pesach and cannot eat from his master's. So you have a contradiction. So the Gemara says Loi Kasha, and I think we spoke this out in the Mishnah. It's not difficult. Kam Mishnah Chreina. That says the second Brisa says he doesn't eat from none of them is the Mishnah Rishona. That means the Mishnah Rishona holds this Mishnah Rishona, which we'll see in a moment, that a Chetzi Eved, Chetzi Ben Chayrim can remain like that indefinitely. We never force the master to free him. He doesn't have to free. He owns 50% of an Eved, 50% he doesn't have to free him. So he's a half of Eved and half of Ben Chayrim. But according to the Mishnah Achroina, the guy that owns the half a Eved, Bezdin is going to force him to make the Eved go free for a particular reason. The Tanam we learned in the Mishnah. Misha chetzi Eved chetzi mecharin. A guy is a half an Eved and a half a free person. Oived is Rabbi Yomecha v'satzmi Yomecha. Divrei Beis Hillel. He works for his master one day, let's say Monday, and Tuesday he works for himself, and Wednesday he works for his master, and Thursday he works for himself. Again, one day. Divrei Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai, I remember Shammai says, we go to pay chesed beis. Beis Shammai says, tikamtem es Rabbi satzmi tikamtem. You satisfied his master. At least he gets to enjoy him half the days. But the Eved himself has a big problem. He's worse than a ger, and he's worse than a regular Eved. Lisa shifcha and yoichal. You can't marry a goyish shifcha like an regular, like an Eved Kanani. Shekvar chetzi becharim. He's a half a Jew. He's half free. Lisa bas chayin. You can't marry a Jewess shadayin chetzi Eved because he's still considered an Eved. And therefore, Abaye said, how could you have a Jewish person not be married? You batal, he should not get married, remain single. The whole point of the world was that we should procreate, and a man should be with a husband. A man should be with his wife. God made it that we should create and to inhabit the world. Because this is to fix the world, we force the master to free this to free him. And we say that the Eved should pay back the master that we forced him to free him. So since this Eved is going to be free anyway, that's why our Mishnah says that because he's going to be free anyway, we allow him to make his own carbon Pesach. And here, this was Beis Shammai's idea. And Beis Shammai was the lenient one, and Beis Hillel turned around their opinion and agreed with Beis Shammai that we do force the master to free up his slave. New Mishnah. A guy says to his servant. Now, you know that the carbon Pesach comes in two flavors. It comes in a goat or a sheep from 8 days old. That's what the Torah says. So a guy says to his servant, he doesn't give him instructions. Go shech me a carbon Pesach. So it's really the servant, it's up to the servant to choose what kind of carbon Pesach he's going to use. If he shechs a goat, it's good. If he shechs a sheep, it's also good because the master has no preference for it. Shachat gedivat leh. If he shechted both a goat and a sheep, then the master should eat from the first thing that he shechted. So he should eat from the goat. Now, shachach. Let's say the master. Let's say the Eved has forgot what the master told him. The Eved has amnesia. The master said shech me a gedi or tleh. And the Eved forgot. What should he do? So the Eved, the servant, I guess there's no WhatsApp or you can't make a phone call back to the rabbi. Which one do you want? So and with the crowd, so he says, the Mishnah says, you should shech both, a sheep and a goat. The Yomen, he said, if my master said I should shech for him a goat, the goat is his, and the goat and the sheep should be mine. If the sheep if he said the sheep should be for my masters, then the sheep is his and the goat should be mine. Now the Gemara says, Shachach Rabbi my Oimaloi. Now here you have a case that both of them had amnesia. The master forgot what he said and the servant forgot what he said. And here comes the servant with a gedi and a tleh. So the rabbi doesn't forget masters forgot what he said. So then Shneim Yetzel Beis Sreifa. You send both of them to the incinerator. But one of them was a kosher Pesach. You just can't eat it because you don't know which one it is. So therefore, the master and the Eved is potter from doing a Pesach Sheni. So the Gemara says that in the first case, that if a guy says to his servant, go shechten, and he doesn't give him specific instructions, so then it's up to the Eved to choose which animal his master likes. So the Gemara says, what's the chiddush? Pshita, shachach di yoichel. If he sexed a goat, that the master should eat it. I mean, why not? So Gemara says, "Afagav the roga." It could be that the chiddush of the Mishnah is even though the servant knows that his master loves sheep better than goat meat, and if he shechs for him a goat, it's still okay. Shachat chaleh v'yoichal. If he shechs a sheep, he should eat. What's the chiddush of that? Afagav the roga b'di. Even though the chiddush is that even though he knows his master prefers goat meat, Still, if he shechted the sheep meat, it's because the master didn't give him specific instructions. The master's okay with the choice that the Eved made. Now the Mishnah said, Shachat gdivet le, if he shecht a goat and a sheep, yoichel min rishon. You should eat from the first Korban Pesach. So now this is a fascinating piece of the Gemara. You should check if the servant has no idea which animal to use, he should check two, and one of them should belong to the servant, and one of them belongs to the master. But which ones should the master eat? Yoichel min rishon. You should eat from the first one. So the Gemara says, well, Tanani, didn't we learn a brisa? You can't be counted for 2 psachim. In other words, how can the master decide later on which Korban Pesach he's going to use? He's going to use from the first one. We know you cannot be subscribed to 2 Korban Pesachs at one time. And for the Gemara, Masnisim bemelech umalka, our Mishnah is talking about a king and a queen. And V'hatanya, as we learned in the brisa, it's a very odd, specific case that our Mishnah is talking about. Ein nimdon al shnei psachim ke'echad. One is not to be subscribed to 2 Korban Pesachs at one time. Says the Gemara, Umasa, b'melech umalka. There was a Jewish king and a Jewish queen. She'amru lavdeim, they told their servants, Su'u shachtu aleinu as a Pesach. Go shecht for us the Korban Pesach. And they didn't give them specific instructions, what animal. Yatsu v'shachtu aleim shnei psachim. They shechted 2 psachim, a tleh and a gedi, bal v'shol as a melech. They asked the melech, can they use it? I mean, which one do you want? So like a good husband, he said, Amalahem l'chu v'shalo as a malka. Do ask the queen. And basically, the question was, is it a kosher Korban Pesach? They shechted 2 psachims, and they know that they only have to have 1 Korban Pesach. So the melech, who was an Amaretz, didn't know any Torah, so he asked his wife, told the servants, ask my wife what to do. Rashi says, Bekia v'chachama haisma. She knew halachas. But so they asked the queen, what's the halacha? Amar lehem l'chu v'shalos Rabbi Gamliel. Go ask the great Rabbi Gamliel. Bal v'shalos Rabbi Gamliel, and they asked Rabbi Gamliel, Amar lehem malko melech daitin kalahen. The king and queen, they're always thinking of bigger problems. They don't want to get into the little issues, deciding on details. And therefore, they are not makbid if it was a goat or a sheep. So therefore, my psak is like what the Mishnah says, Yochlu and Rishon. The first one, they shechted, the king and queen were okay with that. And therefore, that's what our Mishnah says, Yochlu and Rishon, because our Mishnah is talking about a king and queen. Anan, but us, we have preference to it. If the Rab didn't know what we wanted, we can't eat not from the first thing that they shech, not from the second thing they shech. If a person got geshachtin on his behalf of gedi and etleh, he should not eat from the first or the second. Since he's a person that wants to get involved into the decision, he didn't have an agreeable decision at the time of the shechita, so he can't decide later on which one he wants to eat. One more piece of Gemara. They found a dead lizard in the kitchen of this Melech Malka. They wanted to meet Tama all the food at the table. They asked the king what to do. There's a dead lizard. A dead lizard is a sheretz. Go ask the queen what to do. They asked the queen. Go ask Rabbi Gamliel. They asked the Rabbi Gamliel, is everything on the table tameh because they found the dead lizard? Were they cooking with hot or with cold? They said it was hot. So he said to them, throw on the dead lizard a cup of cold water. And they poured a cup of cold water on this lizard, and it started to move, so it's still alive. A live lizard doesn't make tameh. The Tia Rabbi Gamliel kol asudakula, and Rabbi Kiya gave psak that the whole meal was tahar. Nimsa, says the Gemara, Melech toli b'malka, the king relies on the queen. The Nimsa's malka tluya b'Rabbi Gamliel, and the queen is relying on Rabbi Gamliel. Nimsa's the whole kingdom, kol asuda, the whole meal of the king and the queen is Tuli Baragliel is based on the decisions of Rabbi Gamliel. I'm just troubled. Who was this king and queen at the time of Rabbi Gamliel that they were so Jewish that they were concerned about bringing a Korban Pesach and eating B'Tahara? Something, you have to know when Rabbi Gamliel lived. This was after, I guess, maybe after the Chashmonaim, maybe closer to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash.
What's the
Bernard,
difference
I have a
if they were
question.
eating hot or
Oh, I'm
cold?
sorry. Again.
What?
What's the difference if they were eating hot or cold?
Right. It's like, well, if you pour hot chicken soup in a cold bowl, so then the bowl becomes fleischigs, right? So the idea was that if it was hot, that it was absorbed in the food, and then the food becomes
Right, except it was on the table, and number two, they said it was hot. So he said.
So
he
then
said-
if it was hot, then everything would have been tameh, right?
So that's why he said do cold, but if it was cold, he wouldn't have said to do anything.
He would have said not to do anything. That's a good question. What would it be the difference? It was hot. Anybody have an
Right.
answer to that?
Because he said to throw cold, it didn't make a difference what the food was made out of.
Right.
This tumah was just practically how to get the lizard to start to move. If it poured hot, the lizard would have died.
Well, then he just should have just, I would say,
right.
he
That's the
should have
good.
just said, throw cold water on it. What's the difference what they're eating?
That's a good question. That's a good question. You're asking very good. In other words, the whole point of finding out if the kitchen was hot or cold is because if it was hot, we assume it's dead. If it was cold, we assume it's alive. So they
Right,
told
so,
him
but
it's
the
hot.
answer is the same regardless of what the question was. For the
Right.
food.
That's an excellent question.
Just throw cold water. Right. That's
That's a good question. That's a good
Water on
question. Well,
Bernard, if it's a citizen we're talking about, not the Melech and Malka, and he shechted two korbanos Pesach, when do they burn it? Do they wait until it's expired, or do they burn it immediately?
so I would think that they wait till it expires.
That's what I think. So that's what I'm saying. But they didn't mention it in the Gemara, but that would make sense. Right?
That's another subject of regarding what type of psulim you burn right away, like tumah you burn right away, and if you have no eaters, well, I would say no, that you would burn it right away because it's a pasula Korban Pesach because there's no eaters on this Korban Pesach because you can't make a decision later on. So it's like a Korban Pesach that was shechted without any eaters to it.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's pasul right away. It has a din like tumah. Unlike, let's say, a Korban Pesach that was shechted with eaters and the eaters became tameh, then you let it expire. But here it's pasul right away because the guy has no Korban Pesach. He can't decide later on that I'm picking this one.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's good questions, and we'll if anybody has an answer to Steve's question about the Roseach.
Okay.
Okay. Take care. Tanakh. Take care.
Good night.